I never thought I'd be telling this story, but here we are. The day my world turned upside down started like any other Tuesday in Cedar Rapids. The Iowa summer heat was just picking up, and I was finishing a project at the architectural firm where I'd been working for the past 4 years. Melissa and I had been engaged for 8 months with the wedding planned for October, just enough time for the leaves to turn that perfect golden color she loved for the photos. We met 3 years ago at my buddy Jake's 4th of July barbecue. She worked in marketing at the same company as his wife, and from the moment I saw her laughing by the cooler, something just clicked. She had this way of tilting her head when she smiled that made her blonde hair catch the sunlight, and her blue eyes seemed to see right through all my carefully constructed defenses. 2 years of dating, one knee dropped on a hiking trail overlooking the Mississippi, and suddenly we were planning a life together. Everything was perfect, until it wasn't. Looking back, the signs were there for weeks. Melissa had grown distant, always clutching her phone like it was attached to her hand. When I'd enter a room, she'd quickly flip it over or lock the screen. The woman who once fell asleep with her head on my chest now rolled to the far side of the bed, claiming she was too hot to cuddle. Our conversations became shorter, more practical, about bills, wedding vendors, whose parents we'd visit next holiday. The laughter that had first drawn me to her seemed to have evaporated. "Everything okay, babe?" I'd ask. "Just work stress," she'd reply without meeting my eyes. "The Johnson campaign is driving me crazy." I believed her, or maybe I wanted to believe her. We all go through phases, right? Relationships have their ebbs and flows. That's what my married friends always said. Then came that night. I'd cooked her favorite dinner, grilled salmon with that lemon dill sauce she loved, roasted asparagus, and a bottle of the Pinot Grigio we discovered on our weekend trip to Napa last year. I thought maybe a nice dinner would help her relax, help us reconnect. She picked at her food, took small sips of wine, and kept glancing at her phone every few minutes. "Melissa," I said, putting my fork down, "what's really going on? And please don't say nothing or work stress again." She sighed, set down her wine glass with a deliberate motion, and finally met my eyes. "Derek, you know I love you, right? Any sentence that starts that way never ends well." My stomach tightened. "Of course," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "and I love you too." She twisted her engagement ring, the one I'd spent 3 months' salary on, the one she'd cried over when I proposed. "Before I met you, there was someone else. Eric. Your ex from college? The musician? I knew about him. She'd mentioned him a few times. A relationship that lasted through her junior and senior years ended badly when he chose his band's tour over moving with her to Iowa." "Yes," she said, taking another long sip of wine. "He's back in town. His band broke up, and he's working at Sullivan's now, bartending." Sullivan's was a popular downtown bar where we occasionally met friends for drinks. I hadn't noticed any new bartenders, but I wasn't exactly paying attention to the staff. "Okay," I said slowly, waiting for the rest, sensing there was more. Much more. "I ran into him last month at Whole Foods. We talked for a bit. He asked for my number." She was speaking faster now, as if getting the words out quickly would make them less damaging. "We've been texting. Just catching up at first, but..." My hands felt cold despite the warm evening. "But what, Melissa?" She took a deep breath. "Derek, I want to be with you. I want our life together, our wedding, everything we've planned. But there's this unfinished feeling with Eric, like we never had proper closure." "Closure, Baima," I repeated, the word feeling strange in my mouth. "What kind of closure are you looking for exactly?" That's when she said it, the words that would change everything between us forever. "I want to be with you, but I need to sleep with my ex one last time. Time to end the relationship properly." The salmon turned to ash in my mouth. I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. People don't say things like that to their fiancés. They just don't. "You want my permission to cheat on me? Before we're even married?" My voice was surprisingly calm despite the earthquake happening inside me. "It's not cheating if you know about it," she said, as if this logic made perfect sense. "It's just getting the past out of my system, so I can fully commit to our future without any lingering doubts or what-ifs. And if I say no," she looked down at her plate, "then I'll respect that." But I'm afraid I'll always wonder. And eventually, that wondering might turn into resentment. So there it was. Emotional blackmail wrapped in pseudo-psychological babble about closure and fully committing. Sleep with another man or risk our entire future together. I stood up and walked to the window of our apartment, looking down at the street below where normal people were living normal lives, not having conversations about their fiancés sleeping with exes for closure. When? I asked, my back still to her. This Saturday, she said quietly. He has the night off. I told him I needed to talk to you first. How considerate of them both, planning their rendezvous around my feelings. I turned back to face her. Her eyes were pleading, a mixture of hope and guilt that made my stomach turn. In that moment, something shifted inside me. I saw her, really saw her, perhaps for the first time. This wasn't the woman I thought I knew. This was someone else entirely. Take all the closure you need, Melissa, I said evenly. Her face lit up with relief and something else. Excitement? Had she actually been worried I might say no? Really? You understand? God, Derek, this is why I love you. You're so mature, so secure in yourself. Most guys would freak out, but you get it. She stood up, coming toward me with open arms. I stepped back. I'm going to stay at Jake's tonight. I need some space to process this. Her smile faltered. You said it was okay. I said you could do it. I didn't say I would watch you get ready for it or help you pick out which lingerie to wear. I need some air. I grabbed my keys, wallet, and phone, then headed for the door. Derek, wait, she called after me. Should we talk more about this? What's there to talk about? You've made your choice clear. Now I need to make mine. I closed the door behind me before she could respond. In the hallway of our apartment building, I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. My phone buzzed with a text from her. I love you. Please understand this isn't about us. I turned off my phone and drove to Jake's. She said, what? Jake nearly spat out his beer when I told him. We were sitting on his back deck, the night air thick with humidity and the sound of cicadas. His wife Linda was visiting her sister in Chicago, so it was just us in a six-pack of some craft IPA he'd been wanting to try. Yep, closure. That was the word she used. I took another long pull from my bottle. And you said yes? Are you insane? Jake had known me since high school. We'd been through everything together. Girlfriends, breakups, my parents' divorce, his dad's heart attack. He was the brother I never had. I didn't exactly say yes. I said she could take all the closure she needed. Same thing, man. Same damn thing. He shook his head in disbelief. You can't let her do this. This isn't how relationships work. This is some BS she's selling you. I know, I said quietly. But the moment she asked, something died inside me. Jake. I realized I don't even know who she is anymore. Jake leaned forward, elbows on knees. So what's your plan? Because you better have a plan. I do, I said, pulling out my phone and turning it back on. The screen lit up with 5 missed calls and a dozen texts from Melissa. I ignored them all and opened my contacts. I'm going to call her dad. Jake's eyes widened. George? Military George, who threatened to, and I quote, rearrange the face of the last guy who hurt his daughter? That George? The very same. I pressed call before I could lose my nerve. George Williamson answered on the 3rd ring, his gruff voice immediately putting me on edge. Derek? Everything all right? It's nearly midnight. No, sir, everything is not all right, I said, straightening my posture even though he couldn't see me. I need to talk to you about Melissa, and I need you to hear me out before you react. 20 minutes later, after explaining the situation, carefully omitting certain details that might send a protective father on a murderous rampage, George was silent for so long, I thought we'd lost connection. Sir? Are you still there? I'm here, he said, his voice tightly controlled. And what exactly do you want me to do with this information, son? Saturday night, Melissa's going to tell you and Mrs. Williamson that she's staying at her friend Kelly's house. She's not. She's going to be at Eric Donovan's apartment. He bartends at Sullivan's downtown and lives in those new lofts on 3rd Street, apartment 4B. And why are you telling me this instead of handling it yourself? It was a fair question. Because if I confront her, it becomes another fight between us that she can minimize or explain away. But if her father catches her in the act, I let the implication hang. Another long pause. Then, 4B, you said? Yes, sir. I'll take care of it. And Derek? Yes. This doesn't mean I approve of your methods, or that I won't hold you equally responsible for this mess if my daughter ends up hurt. Understood, sir. After we hung up, Jake handed me another beer. You're playing with fire, man. Maybe, I said, but I'm already burning. The next few days were an exercise in acting. I returned home the following morning to find Melissa making pancakes, her specialty for whenever she felt guilty about something. She approached me cautiously, searching my face for signs of anger. I was worried when you didn't come home, she said. I needed time to think, I replied, accepting the plate of pancakes she offered. But I meant what I said. If this is something you feel you need to do, then do it. Relief washed over her face. You're really okay with it? I shrugged. I want you to be happy and free of doubts when we get married. If this is what it takes, so be it. The words tasted bitter in my mouth, but I managed a small smile. She threw her arms around me. You're amazing. I promise after Saturday, it's all about us and our future. No more past, no more Eric, just you and me. I hugged her back stiffly. Just one condition, I said. She pulled back, suddenly wary. What's that? Don't lie to me about where you're going. Don't tell me you're at Kelly's or working late. I'd rather know the truth, even if it's uncomfortable. She nodded eagerly. Of course. Total honesty. The irony wasn't lost on me. For the rest of the week, Melissa was almost giddy, like a weight had been lifted. She was more attentive, more affectionate than she'd been in weeks. She kept touching me, a hand on my arm, fingers through my hair, lingering kisses before work. It was as if giving her permission to betray me had somehow revitalized her desire for me. Or perhaps it was just guilt. On Thursday night, I came home from work to find her waiting with a home-cooked meal and wearing that little black dress I'd bought her for Valentine's Day. The apartment was spotless, candles lit on the dining table, soft music playing in the background. What's the occasion? I asked, setting down my briefcase. No occasion, she said, kissing me lightly. I just wanted to show you how much I appreciate you, how much I love you. I nodded, playing along with this charade. It smells amazing. Over dinner, she chatted enthusiastically about wedding details, the flowers she'd chosen, the song for our first dance, the honeymoon resort in Bali. All plans for a future that, in my mind, no longer existed. I smiled and nodded in all the right places, while my insides churned with disgust. After dinner, she led me to the bedroom, clearly intent on showing her appreciation in more intimate ways. I made an excuse about a headache and too much wine. The hurt look on her face almost made me laugh, as if rejecting sex was somehow worse than what she was planning to do in 2 days' time. Meanwhile, I was making my own preparations. While she was at work on Friday, I packed up most of her belongings, her clothes, toiletries, the framed photos of her family, the collection of scented candles she was so proud of. Everything went into boxes that I stored in the guest bedroom closet. I left out just enough for her not to notice. The clothes she wore regularly, her everyday makeup, her phone charger. I visited a locksmith and had the locks changed. I called our wedding venue and canceled the reservation, forfeiting the deposit. I called her parents' house when I knew both would be at work and left a message explaining that the wedding was off and why, so there would be no miscommunication later. That night, I lay beside her in bed, staring at the ceiling as she slept peacefully next to me. How could she sleep? How could she lie there, breath soft and even, when she was planning to destroy everything we'd built? In the moonlight filtering through our blinds, I studied her face, the curve of her cheek, the slight pucker of her lips, the flutter of her eyelashes as she dreamed. I tried to reconcile this woman with the one I'd fallen in love with, but couldn't. One of them was an illusion, and I was increasingly convinced it was the latter. Saturday morning brought with it a knot of tension in my stomach. Today was the day my fiancée would attempt to sleep with her ex-boyfriend with my supposed blessing, the day her father would catch them, the day everything would change. Melissa spent the morning at a spa with Kelly, a pre-planned girls' day that now seemed like convenient preparation for her evening plans. When she returned home, she was glowing, relaxed, freshly manicured and massaged. "How was the spa?" I asked, looking up from the book I wasn't really reading. "Amazing," she sighed happily, dropping her purse on the counter. "The hot stone massage was just what I needed." I bet it was, I thought, but didn't say. She disappeared into the bedroom, and I could hear the shower running. 45 minutes later, she emerged wrapped in a towel, hair damp and skin flushed from the hot water. "I was thinking," she said, sitting on the arm of the couch where I was pretending to read, "maybe we could go to brunch tomorrow. That new place on Grand Avenue everyone's talking about?" "Sure," I agreed, knowing there would be no brunch, no tomorrow, no us. "Sounds nice." She smiled and kissed my cheek. "I'll make a reservation." As evening approached, she grew quiet, almost nervous. She took an extra long shower, dried her hair with meticulous care, and spent twice as long as usual on her makeup. I sat in the living room flipping through channels without really seeing anything, waiting for the inevitable. When she emerged from our bedroom, she was wearing a dress I'd never seen before, a tight black number that left little to the imagination. Her hair was styled in loose waves, her lips painted a deep red, her eyes smoky and seductive. "You look nice," I said flatly. "Special occasion?" She had the decency to blush. "Derek, I know this is weird, if you've changed your mind." "I haven't," I said quickly. "Have you?" She shook her head. "No. I need this. For us." "Then go get your closure," I said, returning to the TV. "Text me if you'll be late." She hesitated by the door. "I love you," she said softly. I looked up at her, this beautiful stranger I'd planned to spend my life with. "Drive safe." After she left, I poured myself a whiskey and waited. The clock on the wall seemed to tick with exaggerated slowness. I tried to imagine what was happening. Melissa arriving at Eric's apartment, him greeting her at the door, perhaps a glass of wine to settle nerves, awkward conversation giving way to reminiscence, and then I shook my head to clear the image. It didn't matter anymore. Whatever happened or didn't happen tonight, we were done. That decision had been made the moment she'd asked the question. My phone rang at 9:17 p.m. It was George. "It's done," he said without preamble. "What happened?" I asked, despite myself. "I showed up at the apartment like we planned." Knocked on the door. That piece of work, Eric answered, wearing nothing but a bathrobe. Melissa was inside, already had her shoes off, wine poured. There were candles lit. My stomach clenched. And nothing. I didn't say a word, just stared at both of them until Melissa started crying. Told her to get her things, that her mother and I would be waiting in the car downstairs. "She went with you." "Of course she did," George said gruffly. "She's not stupid, just foolish." She knew what getting caught meant. "Did you talk on the way home?" "Not a word. Her mother did enough talking for all of us once we got her home." I've never seen Eleanor so upset. I could imagine. Eleanor Williamson was usually the picture of Midwestern politeness. It would take something like this to crack that veneer. "She'll be heading your way soon, I expect," George continued. "Eleanor thinks she should face you. Take responsibility." "I agree." "She won't like what's waiting for her," I said. "No," he agreed. "I don't suspect she will." "For what it's worth, son, I'm sorry. I thought I raised her better than this." "It's not your fault, sir." "Isn't it?" He sighed heavily. "We'll talk more later." She's leaving now. After we hung up, I went to the guest bedroom and began bringing out the boxes. I arranged them neatly by the front door, a cardboard wall between our past and her future. Then I waited. It was nearly 11 p.m. when I heard her key in the lock. The door opened slowly, tentatively, as if she was afraid of what she might find inside. When she saw me sitting calmly in the living room, surrounded by her boxed-up belongings, her eyes widened with shock, then narrowed with anger. "What is this?" she demanded. "Your things," I said simply. "Most of them, anyway. Whatever I missed, you can come get when I'm at work on Monday. I'll leave a key with the building manager." She stared at me, uncomprehending. "You're breaking up with me? Because of tonight?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "No, Melissa. I broke up with you the moment you asked to sleep with another man. Everything since then has just been closure." Her face crumpled. "My dad showed up. Nothing even happened. Eric and I were just talking, having wine, in his apartment, with you dressed like that? I gestured to her outfit. Come on, Melissa. Don't insult my intelligence on top of everything else. This is crazy, she said, pacing in front of the boxes. You set me up. You told me it was okay, and then you sent my father to spy on me? Who does that? Someone who wanted to see the truth, and now I have. The truth, she repeated incredulously. The truth is that I was honest with you. I could have cheated behind your back like most people would, but I respected you enough to talk about my feelings. Your feelings, I echoed. Your feelings about wanting to sleep with your ex. And you expected me to what? Thank you for your honesty? Give you a medal for not being a typical cheater? I expected you to understand, she shouted. To recognize that relationships are complicated, that people have history, that sometimes you need to resolve the past before moving forward. And I expected you to respect our relationship enough not to even consider sleeping with someone else. I shot back, finally raising my voice. I expected my future wife to understand that asking for permission to cheat is still asking to cheat. We stared at each other across the living room, both breathing hard, months of unspoken tension finally erupting. She was the first to look away. So that's it? She asked, her voice smaller now. 3 years together, and you're throwing it all away over something that didn't even happen? But it would have happened, I said quietly. If your dad hadn't shown up, you would have slept with Eric tonight. Can you honestly tell me you wouldn't have? She bit her lip, unable to meet my eyes, and that was answer enough. Where am I supposed to go? She asked after a long moment. That's not my problem anymore, I said. Call Kelly. Call your parents. Hell, call Eric. But you can't stay here. This is my apartment too, she said, a hint of defiance returning. My name is on the lease. True, I acknowledged, but if you want a legal battle on top of everything else, I'm ready for that too. And think about how much more your parents, our friends, everyone will know if we go that route. She looked at me as if seeing a stranger. Who are you? The Derek I know would never be so cruel. The Melissa I knew would never ask to sleep with her ex for closure. I guess we never really knew each other at all. She stared at me for a long moment, then stood up, dignity gathering around her like a cloak. Fine. I'll go to Kelly's tonight, but this isn't over, Derek. When you calm down, when you really think about it, you'll see that what I asked for wasn't so terrible. People make mistakes. People forgive. Some mistakes can't be forgiven, I said, and some shouldn't be. She grabbed her purse and walked to the door, stepping around the boxes of her life. You'll regret this, she said, hand on the doorknob. When you're alone and missing me, you'll wish you'd been more understanding. Maybe, I conceded, but right now all I feel is relief. The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded like the end of a chapter. I went to the kitchen, poured another whiskey, and finally let myself feel the full weight of what had just happened. The woman I loved, the future I'd planned, all gone in the space of a few days. But somewhere beneath the pain was a seed of something else. Pride, maybe. Or self-respect. I hadn't crumbled. I hadn't compromised myself to keep someone who clearly didn't value what we had. I raised my glass to my reflection in the window. Here's to closure, I said and drank. The next morning I woke to pounding on my front door. I checked the time, 7:30 a.m. on a Sunday. Not a good sign. I threw on sweatpants and a t-shirt and padded to the door, peering through the peephole. Kelly stood outside, arms crossed, face set in a scowl. I opened the door with a sigh. Morning, Kelly. You're a real piece of work. You know that? She said, pushing past me into the apartment. Her eyes widened at the boxes by the door. Wow, you really went full nuclear, didn't you? Did Melissa send you to get her stuff? I asked, closing the door. No, she sent me to talk some sense into you. She's a wreck, Derek. She cried all night, I shrugged. What did she expect? Kelly turned to face me, her expression incredulous. She expected the man who claimed to love her to understand a momentary lapse in judgment. She expected forgiveness, or at least a conversation before you packed up her entire life. A momentary lapse in judgment is buying shoes you can't afford or having one too many drinks at a party, I countered. Planning to sleep with your ex while engaged to someone else is a fundamental betrayal. She didn't go through with it, Kelly exclaimed, throwing her hands up. Because she got caught, I pointed out, not because she changed her mind. Kelly paced around my living room, shaking her pinhead. I don't get you, Derek. You've always been so reasonable, so understanding. What happened to the guy who forgave Melissa when she accidentally erased your presentation the night before your big client meeting? The guy who didn't blink when she maxed out your joint credit card on that shopping spree last Christmas? Those were mistakes, I said. This was a choice. A conscious decision to betray everything we supposedly stood for. Kelly stopped pacing and looked at me seriously. Have you ever made a mistake in a relationship? Ever been tempted? Ever done something you regretted? Of course, I admitted, but I've never considered cheating. Not once. So that's your line in the sand? The unforgivable sin? She shook her head. Seems arbitrary to me, especially since she was honest about it, and it never actually happened. I walked to the kitchen and started making coffee, needing something to do with my hands. You know what, Kelly? I don't care what you think, or what anyone thinks. This isn't about some moral code or relationship rules. It's about respect. Melissa didn't respect me enough to honor our commitment. End of story. Kelly followed me to the kitchen. She loves you, you idiot. People who are in love sometimes do stupid things. They get confused, they make bad choices. But that doesn't mean the love isn't real. Maybe her love is real, I conceded, measuring coffee grounds, but it's clearly not enough. God, you're stubborn, Kelly groaned. What do I have to say to make you reconsider? Nothing, I said simply. My mind is made up. Kelly stared at me for a long moment and then sighed heavily. Fine. You want to throw away the best thing that ever happened to you, that's your business. But don't expect her to wait around while you figure out what an idiot you're being. There are plenty of men who would appreciate her. Like Eric? I asked sarcastically. Kelly's expression shifted, just a flicker, but enough to tell me I'd hit a nerve. Wait, I said, putting down the coffee pot. Is she with him now? No, Kelly said too quickly. She's at my place. You're lying, I realized. She went back to him, didn't she? After leaving here last night. Kelly looked uncomfortable. It's not like that. She was upset. She needed someone to talk to. And she chose the guy she was planning to sleep with? I laughed bitterly. Perfect, just perfect. Don't judge her, Kelly said defensively. You pushed her away. What was she supposed to do? Oh, I don't know, maybe go to her parents? Or your place like she told me she was going to? But sure, running to Eric's arms makes total sense if this was really just about closure. Kelly had the grace to look embarrassed. Look, it's complicated. She's confused. You broke her heart. That's rich, I scoffed. Tell Melissa she can come get the rest of her things tomorrow. I'll be at work from 8 to 6. The building manager will let her in. That's it? That's all you have to say? That's all. Kelly shook her head in disgust. You'll regret this, Derek. Maybe not today, but someday. You sound just like her, I observed. Must be a line you rehearsed together. Kelly stormed to the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. For the record, I always thought you were too good for her. Now I realize it was the other way around. The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone with the smell of fresh coffee and the bitter taste of confirmation. I'd been right all along. Melissa's feelings for Eric weren't about closure. They were about rekindling something she'd never fully let go of. I poured my coffee and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet Sunday morning street below. A young couple strolled hand in hand, stopping occasionally to kiss. An elderly man walked his tiny dog, pausing patiently each time it found something interesting to sniff. Normal people living normal lives. I wondered if any of them had ever experienced this kind of betrayal, this swift and sudden destruction of everything they thought was solid and true. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Checking in. You good? I typed back. Kelly just left. Melissa's with Eric. His response was immediate. WTF? You serious? Coming over. 20 minutes. True to his word, Jake arrived 19 minutes later with a box of donuts and a 6-pack of orange juice. Breakfast of champions, he announced, setting everything on my counter. Or at least breakfast of guys whose fiancés are psychopaths. She's not a psychopath, I said automatically. Then caught myself. Why was I defending her? Jake gave me a look. Dude, she asked permission to cheat, got caught before she could, and then immediately ran to the guy anyway. If that's not crazy behavior, I don't know what is. Put that way, it did sound insane. Maybe I dodged a bullet, I muttered. A bullet? More like a nuclear missile. Jake handed me a glazed donut. Eat. Sugar helps with trauma. Scientific fact. I took a bite, realizing I was actually starving. Thanks for coming over. What are friends for? He leaned against the counter. So what's the plan? Burn her clothes, get drunk, key her car? I'm open to suggestions. Despite everything, I laughed. No destruction of property. I'm thinking more along the lines of moving on with my life. Jake nodded approvingly. Mature, boring, but mature. The mature part is temporary, I assured him. Once the shock wears off, I reserve the right to have a complete meltdown. Fair enough. And I reserve the right to be there with a camera when it happens. We spent the day doing nothing in particular, watching bad action movies, ordering pizza, deliberately not talking about Melissa except when Jake would occasionally mutter psycho under his breath. It was exactly what I needed. Mindless distraction and the steady presence of someone who was firmly on my side. That evening, after Jake left, I sat down and made a list of things I needed to do. Contact the wedding vendors, return the tuxedo deposits, cancel the honeymoon reservations, notify guests. The practical tasks of dismantling a future that would never happen. It was depressing work, but necessary. With each item crossed off, I felt a strange mix of sadness and liberation. I was just about to turn in when my phone rang. George Williamson. I hesitated, then answered. Derek, he said, his voice grave. We need to talk. Yes, sir, I agreed, bracing myself. Melissa's mother and I would like you to come over tomorrow evening. There are things that need to be said face to face. With all due respect, sir, I'm not sure that's a good idea. Melissa and I have said all we need to say to each other. Melissa won't be here, he said. She's elsewhere. This is between you and us. That piqued my curiosity. All right. What time? 7 o'clock. And Derek. Thank you. I hung up, puzzled by the gratitude in his voice. What could he possibly be thanking me for? The Williamson home was a stately two-story colonial in a quiet suburb 15 minutes outside downtown. I'd spent countless holidays and family dinners there over the past 3 years. It had always felt warm and welcoming. Tonight, as I walked up the familiar path to the front door, it felt like I was approaching a stranger's house. George answered before I could knock, as if he'd been watching for me through the window. Derek, he greeted me with a firm handshake. Come in. Eleanor waited in the living room, perched on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped tightly in her lap. When she saw me, she stood and, to my surprise, embraced me. Oh, Derek, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry about all of this. Please sit, George gestured to an armchair. I sat feeling oddly formal, like a job interview or a disciplinary meeting. Eleanor offered me coffee, which I declined. There was an awkward silence as we all tried to figure out where to start. Finally, George cleared his throat. First off, I want to apologize for my daughter's behavior. What she did, what she planned to do, was wrong. Eleanor and I raised her better than that. You don't need to apologize for her, sir, I said. Melissa is an adult. She made her own choices. Yes, she did, Eleanor agreed sadly, and now she's continuing to make poor choices. Kelly mentioned she's with Eric now, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. George's face darkened. That worthless musician. He's part of why we wanted to talk to you. We need you to understand something about Melissa, about her history with that boy. Eleanor reached for her husband's hand, a silent signal that she would take over. Derek, when Melissa was in college, her relationship with Eric wasn't just unhealthy, it was destructive. He was manipulative, possessive. She changed while she was with him, became someone we didn't recognize. She never told me that, I said, surprised. Melissa had mentioned the relationship had ended badly, but had never gone into details. Of course not, George interjected, and she was embarrassed, ashamed of how she let him control her. When they finally broke up, When he chose that ridiculous band over her, she was devastated. But we were relieved. We thought she'd dodged a bullet. And then she met you, Eleanor continued, her expression softening. A respectful, ambitious young man with a good head on his shoulders. You brought back the Melissa we knew, confident, happy, looking toward the future instead of dwelling in drama. Until Eric came back to town, George added grimly. We're worried, Eleanor said, leaning forward. She's falling back into old patterns. When she came home that night after George found them together, she wasn't just upset about being caught. She was already making excuses for Eric, blaming herself, blaming you. It was like watching her college self all over again. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I didn't want Melissa to be hurt. But I'm not sure what this has to do with me anymore. George and Eleanor exchanged a look. Then George spoke. We're not asking you to take her back. What she did was unforgivable, and frankly, I respect how you have handled it. Shows character. But, I prompted, sensing there was more. But we're concerned about this reconciliation with Eric, Eleanor explained. Melissa isn't thinking clearly. She's vulnerable right now, and he's taking advantage of that. We're afraid she's going to make even bigger mistakes. Like what? I asked. George's jaw tightened. Like moving to Nashville with him. Apparently his music career is back on and he wants her to go with him. She's already put in her notice at work. They leave in 2 weeks. The news hit me with unexpected force. Melissa leaving Iowa, following Eric to chase his doubtful music dreams? It seems so unlike the practical, career-focused woman I knew. I'm not sure what you want me to do about that, I said carefully. Melissa's made it clear she's moving on. We thought perhaps you could talk to her, Eleanor suggested. She respects you, Derek. She might listen to you in a way she won't listen to us. I shook my head slowly. I'm sorry, but I can't do that. Any conversation between Melissa and me right now would only make things worse. Besides, she's an adult. If she wants to make this mistake, that's her choice. George nodded as if my answer confirmed something for him. That's fair. We shouldn't have asked. It's just hard to watch your child make the same mistake twice, especially when you can see the train wreck coming. I understand, I said, and I'm truly sorry you're going through this. You've always been kind to me, treated me like family. I wanted to be your son-in-law. I wanted to make Melissa happy. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. We know that, dear, and for what it's worth, we think Melissa will regret her choices someday. We just hope it's not too late when she finally sees clearly. Me too, I said softly. The rest of the visit was brief. Eleanor showed me recent photos of her garden, a transparent attempt to move to safer conversational ground. George poured himself a whiskey and offered me one, which I accepted. We talked about his auto repair business, about my recent projects at work, normal everyday topics that felt surreal under the circumstances. When I finally left, both of them hugged me, Eleanor a bit longer than necessary. Take care of yourself, son, George said, clapping me on the shoulder. As I drove home, their concern for Melissa kept replaying in my mind. If her own parents were this worried about her relationship with Eric, maybe there was more to the story than I knew. For a brief moment, I considered calling her, warning her, trying to make her see reason. But then I remembered the look on her face when she'd asked permission to cheat, the way she'd run straight to Eric after I'd ended things, and my resolve hardened. Her choices were no longer my concern. The next morning, I woke to a text from an unknown number. This is Eric. We need to talk. Meet me at Sullivan's tonight at 8. I stared at the message in disbelief. Eric wanted to meet? The audacity was breathtaking. I typed and deleted several responses, ranging from a simple no to suggestions about what Eric could do with his request that were both anatomically impossible and incredibly satisfying to imagine. In the end, curiosity won out. I wanted to see the man who had been willing to sleep with an engaged woman, the man Melissa had thrown away our future for. Fine, I texted back. 8 p.m. Work that day was a blur. I couldn't focus on blueprints or client emails with the impending meeting looming over me. What could Eric possibly want to talk about? To gloat? To apologize? To warn me to stay away from Melissa? Each possibility seemed more unlikely than the last. At 7:45 p.m., I walked into Sullivan's for the first time since this whole mess began. The bar was moderately busy for a Monday, with after-work professionals unwinding over drinks and a few early regulars claiming their usual spots. I scanned the room but didn't see Eric. Taking a seat at the bar, I ordered a whiskey neat and prepared to wait. At precisely 8 p.m., Eric emerged from the back room, now in bartender mode. Black shirt, practiced smile, hair artfully tousled. He spotted me immediately and nodded, holding up a finger to indicate he'd be with me in a minute. I watched as he skillfully mixed a complicated cocktail for a group of young women, flirting just enough to ensure a good tip, but not so much as to seem unprofessional. This was a man who knew exactly what he was doing. Finally, he approached my end of the bar. "Derek," he said, extending his hand. "Thanks for coming." I ignored the offered handshake. "What do you want, Eric?" He withdrew his hand, not seeming offended. "Right to business." "I respect that." He glanced around. "Look, my break's in 15 minutes. Can we talk in the back? More private. Whatever you have to say, you can say it here," I insisted. He sighed. "Fine. I'll be blunt. You need to take Melissa back." I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," he said, leaning in closer to keep our conversation private. "This thing with Melissa and me, it's not working out. Never was going to work out. But she's too stubborn to admit it, and now she's talking about moving to Nashville with me." "And this concerns me how?" I asked coldly. Eric ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of genuine frustration. "Because she doesn't belong with me, man. She belongs with you. The steady guy, the future husband, the picket fence and 2.5 kids. That's not me. Never was. Never will be." "Does Melissa know you're here talking to me?" "Hell no," he scoffed. "She'd kill me. But someone needs to fix this mess, and it's clearly not going to be her." "Let me get this straight," I said, struggling to keep my voice even. "You were willing to sleep with my fiancée while we were engaged. Now that you have her, you've decided you don't want her, so you're trying to pawn her back off on me." Eric had the decency to look embarrassed. "It sounds bad when you put it that way." "It is bad. Every part of this is bad." I downed the rest of my whiskey. "Why did you do it? Why get involved with an engaged woman in the first place?" He shrugged. "Honestly? Because she was there, because she was interested, because it felt like unfinished business." He paused, then added, "And because she's hot." "Sorry, but it's true." "You're a real class act," I said, disgusted. "Never claimed to be anything else," he replied. "But here's the thing. Melissa and I were toxic years ago, and we're toxic now. The only difference is that now I'm mature enough to see it. We bring out the worst in each other. Always have." "So break up with her," I suggested. "Problem solved." "I've tried," he admitted. "Twice since you two split. But she's convinced we're meant to be together. That it's fate or some crap that I came back to town right when she was having doubts about marrying you." "And you think if I take her back, she'll just leave you and come running?" "In a heartbeat," he said confidently. "She talks about you constantly, compares me to you, gets all weepy when she drives past your building. Classic signs of someone not over their ex." I laughed humorlessly. "She's not my ex because she chose to leave. She's my ex because she wanted to sleep with you for closure, and I had enough self-respect to walk away." Eric winced. "Yeah, about that. The whole closure thing was my idea." My blood went cold. "What?" He looked genuinely regretful. "We ran into each other at Whole Foods, got talking, exchanged numbers. It was innocent at first, just catching up. But then things got flirty, and I suggested meeting up. She said she was engaged, happy, couldn't do that to you. So you suggested she asked for permission, I guessed, the pieces falling into place." "Sort of. I told her about this friend of mine whose fiancé let her sleep with her ex one last time before they got married. Said it made their relationship stronger because there were no more what-ifs or unresolved feelings." He avoided my gaze. "Obviously, I made that story up. And she believed it." "She wanted to believe it," he corrected. "She was looking for a way to explore whatever she still felt for me without having to give you up." I gave her that way. The revelation should have made me angry, but instead I felt oddly calm. In a way, it confirmed what I already knew, that Melissa had been all too willing to risk our relationship for a fantasy, a what if, a road not taken. So what now? I asked. You've confessed. You've asked me to take her back. What exactly are you expecting to happen here? Eric looked at me earnestly. Talk to her. Make her see that running away to Nashville with me is a mistake, that her life is here, with you. My life is here, I agreed, but hers no longer is. Not with me, anyway. What Melissa does now, whether she goes to Nashville or stays in Cedar Rapids, whether she's with you or someone else, is not my concern. That's cold, man. No, it's realistic. Melissa made her choice. Several choices, actually. Now she has to live with the consequences. Eric studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. You know what? I get it. I'd probably feel the same way if I were you. Is that all? I asked, standing up. Because I'd like to pay my tab and leave. One more thing, Eric said, reaching under the bar. He pulled out a small velvet box and slid it across to me. Her engagement ring. She left it at my place. Thought you might want it. I stared at the box without opening it. The 3-carat diamond I'd saved for months to buy, the symbol of a promise now broken beyond repair. Keep it, I said, pushing it back toward him. Sell it. Maybe it'll fund your music career in Nashville. Eric looked surprised. You sure? It's worth a lot. Consider it payment for showing me who Melissa really is before I married her. I threw down enough cash to cover my drink, plus a tip. Goodbye, Eric. For what it's worth, he called after me. I really am sorry. I paused at the door. If that's true, then do the right thing. Break things off with Melissa cleanly before she uproots her life for you. She deserves at least that much honesty. Whether he took my advice, I didn't know. And truthfully, I didn't care. As I walked to my car, I felt lighter than I had in weeks, as if the last thread tying me to Melissa in this whole sordid situation had finally been cut. Word traveled fast in Cedar Rapids. Jake's wife, Linda, called me one evening with news she'd heard from her cousin, who worked at Melissa's company. They're really doing it, she said. Melissa quit her job yesterday. Told everyone she's moving to Nashville with some musician boyfriend. People at her office are shocked. She's throwing away a management track position to follow some bartender to Tennessee. Good for them, I said, surprised by how little I felt about the news. No anger, no jealousy, not even satisfaction that her impulsive decision would likely end badly. Just nothing. You okay? Linda asked cautiously. Better than okay, I realized. I think I'm finally free. 2 months after the breakup, on what would have been our wedding day, I woke up feeling strangely peaceful. The hurt hadn't disappeared completely. I doubted it ever would, but it had dulled to a manageable ache, a reminder of a lesson learned rather than a fresh wound. I spent the morning hiking in Palisades Kepler State Park. The autumn leaves a riot of gold and crimson around me. Melissa had wanted an outdoor wedding, surrounded by this exact palette of colors. Now the beauty belonged to me alone, not tied to what might have been. Later that evening, Jake and Linda insisted on taking me out. You're not spending tonight alone, Linda had declared when she called that morning. We're going to Vincenzo's at 8. Dress nice. No arguments. Vincenzo's was the best Italian restaurant in Cedar Rapids, a place Melissa and I had gone for special occasions. I suspected Jake and Linda had chosen it deliberately, a way of reclaiming a place that might otherwise be tainted with memories. I arrived to find not just Jake and Linda, but a small group of friends gathered at a large table. Co-workers from my firm, Jake's brother and his wife, a couple we'd known from college. A "we're glad you didn't marry her" celebration disguised as a casual dinner. Surprised? Jake asked as I approached. Very, I admitted, touched by the gesture. This wasn't necessary. Of course it was, Linda said, hugging me. Now sit. We've already ordered appetizers. The evening was exactly what I needed. Good food, better company, conversations that had nothing to do with my failed engagement. People were careful not to mention Melissa, and I was grateful for that. Tonight wasn't about dwelling on the past. It was about embracing the present. We were midway through dessert when my phone buzzed with a text. I ignored it at first, but when it buzzed twice more in quick succession, I excused myself to check. worried it might be an emergency. 3 messages from a Nashville area code. Derek, it's Melissa. I got your number from Kelly. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to talk to you. Please, my stomach tightened. After all this time, after everything that had happened, what could she possibly need to say to me? Everything okay? Jake asked when I returned to the table, clearly noticing my distraction. Fine, I lied. Just work stuff. I managed to refocus on the conversation, but the text lingered in the back of my mind. By the time dinner was over and everyone was saying their goodbyes, I decided to respond. Not because I owed Melissa anything, but because I owed it to myself to close this chapter completely. Back in my apartment, I typed a simple reply. What do you need to talk about? Her response came almost immediately. Can I call you? No, I texted back. Just say what you need to say. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I made a huge mistake, Derek. All of it. Eric, Nashville, everything. I'm coming back to Cedar Rapids next week. I was hoping we could meet. I stared at the message, a strange mix of emotions washing over me. Not satisfaction that she'd realized her error, not vindication that her fantasy had fallen apart, not even anger at her audacity in reaching out. Just a profound sense of distance, as if I was reading about a stranger's life. No, I replied. Whatever you need to say, you can say it now. Another long pause, then, I miss you. I love you. I know I hurt you in the worst way, but I was confused and stupid. Eric and I were a disaster from the start. Nothing like what you and I had. I want to come home. To you. Home. To me. As if the last few months hadn't happened. As if she could just slide back into the life she'd discarded so carelessly. That's not possible, I wrote. What we had is gone, Melissa. You need to accept that and move on. I have. Please, she texted back immediately. Just one meeting, one chance to explain face to face. That's all I'm asking. There's nothing to explain. Your actions were clear enough. People make mistakes, Derek. Terrible ones. But they can change, learn, grow. I have. Please give me a chance to show you. I thought about it. Really thought about it. What would happen if I agreed to meet her? Would there be tears, apologies, promises to do better? Would part of me still respond to her, still feel something for the woman I'd once planned to spend my life with? Perhaps, but what then? Could I ever truly trust her again? Could I build a future on a foundation so thoroughly cracked? I'm sorry, Melissa, I finally responded. But the answer is no. I wish you well, but we're done. Her reply took nearly 10 minutes to arrive. I understand. I don't blame you, but I want you to know that loving you was the best part of my life, and losing you is entirely my fault. I'll regret it forever. Goodbye, Derek. I read the message twice, then set my phone down without responding. There was nothing left to say.